Hey, everybody, welcome to the Aligned Love Podcast. This is the place where I am going to help you find the one thing that you feel is missing: healthy love. I am your host, Lauren Zoller, and in this podcast, I will share with you how to attract love, live in alignment, and elevate your deepest relationships. So buckle up, get present, tune into your body, and open up to the possibility that you truly do get to have it all. Let's dive in. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Aligned Love Podcast. Kristin's here with me today. And well, I'm visiting her for 2 weeks in Chicago because we have an SE training. And as you all know, she's my other half. And so I had to come early so that we could spend some time together. So we're just doing an off-the-cuff episode today. Unscripted. I feel like I haven't really spoken about anything that has happened. I mean, since I moved back from Denver to Nashville. That was my last solo episode.
So many things have happened. I mean,
So many things.
you got new blue light blockers. They look great.
My hair is brown.
You're brunette again.
I know.
Your natural hair color, by the way.
Natural hair.
Yeah.
Coming
In
in
case
hot.
y'all didn't know. Yeah.
Yeah. So many things have happened. And we're sitting down to think about what we wanted to talk about on the show. And as it goes, who knows what's going to come out, right? Because every single time we try to have some sort of an agenda, the agenda never actually happens.
Remember when your assistant asked if we wanted interview questions?
Oh yeah. I was supposed to interview somebody else on the Aligned Love podcast today, and I came in and I said, hey, you want to do this instead? Because I just feel like we haven't done a podcast episode in a long time. And so I messaged my assistant and said, hey, Christin and I are just going to do an off-the-cuff episode. And she was like, okay, great. Do you want me to send a list of questions? And I was like, that's
not shout out. Consummate professional, nailing it. Doing a good job, girl.
doing a good job. We need no prompts for questions, because you guys know every time you listen to us that we're just going to talk the way that we normally would.
And I'm going to try to forget that this is even here because we're
You know, it's
a little
weird
bit. So we're going
situation.
to talk to each other because that's how the best conversations happen. So
Always.
glad that you can be a voyeur into this convo
And also, before we even jump into this, Christin and I are thinking about doing our own podcast.
we have bat that idea around quite a bit. For those of you who might not be familiar, I started a podcast back in 2020, right before everything happened, right when I gave birth to my daughter, James. It was called Nothing Confidential. There's 3 seasons of it. It was phenomenal. It was so fun. Had a great time. You were on it several times. We did swaps a few times. And I really miss it. I love podcasting as a platform. I love it as a way of sharing and building community. And I'm just not in a place in my life right now where the back end of it is production and all that stuff. I could take or leave, but I do miss having conversations and putting out content in this way, because you know how I feel about the rest of social media, but I really do enjoy these types of conversations and opening the opportunity for, to talk about stuff that people just don't talk about enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that's why, because I'll tell you, before the Aligned Love podcast became the Aligned Love podcast, it was the Balance Boss podcast.
Yes, it was.
And I've had some heavy hitters on the show. And my most listened to episodes on both the Balance Boss and on the Aligned Love podcast are ours.
I think that says more about our chemistry than it does anything.
It does. So that's why I'm trying to convince her. So if you can, please leave a comment anywhere that you see this podcast and convince Christin that she needs to do a podcast with me.
We'll see.
All right, well, let's talk about life. I know that something that we wanted to talk about and we're going to kind of go deep into is I've been dating.
Yes, you have.
You're back out there. I'm back out there. I'm back on the horse. Back on it's been quite a journey, but it's been so good, actually. Like, this is the first time, I think, navigating back out into the dating world that I have felt so different about what's coming in and what's making its way into my reality. And I've been learning, I feel like I'm learning lessons at lightning speed.
And I would even reflect back that in the decade of knowing you and dating and all the things, this is the first time in 10 years that it feels like you're actually having fun dating, that you're actually enjoying yourself. And the stories that we laugh over, it's more because there is joy there than the fact that they're so bad that you have to laugh so that you don't cry.
I feel like at some point we need to tell the story.
Oh, whenever you're ready. To tell the story.
Today, maybe, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how it goes.
I did a little teaser. This is the story that I was asked not to tell anymore because how long ago was that? 2 years ago? Because it's such a good story from a story standpoint, if we are not considering, and I've never thought of it from, being one of the subjects of the story, obviously, but it's my favorite story about her to tell. Not tell it.
You know what? We are turning over a new leaf, and we could have a whole podcast on just my dating fiascos that I've had in the past. But this one was,
we're co-writing a memoirish book. It's going to be called Panties in My Purse, The Long Walk Home. Panties in my purse lots of times. Listen, everybody has tucked a thong and run. We've been
my little anxious attached self, probably left my panties there on purpose so that I had a reason to call
So
it.
he call you back. Oh, yeah, I'll let you call me. So you put those right in there.
He's like, I'm taking the panties and I'm running. Please do not ever find me ever again. So we're gonna just start a whole podcast of my dating escapades coming from this little anxious attached. Not anymore. I'm so proud of yourself.
Hopefully these days.
I know. I'm in so much security.
Out of us.
Yeah, I've just done so much. So much work. Really, Christin has been such an integral part of my healing. And as you all know, we're both in the somatic space. As you all know, everybody's listening. Maybe you don't know that we're in the somatic space.
We are.
Well, we are.
Space.
We are. And we went on this journey together. But I'm derailing from the salmon story, so maybe we should.
And I want the salmon story derailing from probably going, who else knows what's going to happen after that? But if we're starting with the salmon story, anything is possible.
So let's start with the salmon story.
Okay.
Because maybe what we'll do is
That's a picture.
we're gonna paint a picture of what dating was like for Lauren back then, and then what dating is like for Lauren now, and then hopefully people will be inspired.
Yeah. This was many moons ago. I don't even know how many years, but it's been more than 5.
Yeah.
Yeah, more than 5 years.
I'm gonna set it up and then you can bring it home.
Okay.
For the home run. Okay. So Christin and Mike, who if we do a podcast, he's gonna come on and give us stats.
Mike is my husband.
Yes, Mike is Christin's husband, who also feels like my husband.
Yes, he's
times.
our community husband.
And years ago, when you all lived in Nashville, they had a neighbor.
We are not going to.
We're not mentioning names,
Because
but
it's not worth it.
it's not worth it. However, I remember seeing the neighbor at one point and coming home for a very nice dinner at Christin and Mike's and being told, you do what you want, you're an adult, but this might not be the best option for your dating
So when we
situation right
fill in deeds, this is how the
The
2-part
deeds.
story goes. Fill in the deeds. Yes, this neighbor, he is, what do we say? And he's conventionally good looking and used that to the utmost advantage. Lala's out here in the streets and she catches sight of this tall drink of water and waggles her eyebrows at me. And I'm like, no,
Don't do it.
don't do it. Love you. Don't do it. I mean, obviously you are an adult and an autonomous being. So do what feels right. But I'm just heavily,
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
just don't.
And so she told me no, and I heard yes with blinking.
It's you should
neon
try. Go for it.
So I call her 2 days later and I'm like, hey, remember that conversation you had about this being a no? Well, I invited him over for a couple's dinner and you're cooking.
And you invited the couple. So what are we making for dinner? And
AKA, what are you making for dinner?
what time can you
What
do it?
time can you be at my house?
So we did settle on miso glazed salmon tacos. So it was
Yes.
kind of an Asian flair situation. Outdid myself.
These
Outdid-
cups were there.
Yes. These cups also are homemade Reese's peanut butter situation.
She went all out.
Yeah. And we weren't super committed to passing it off as you had done it, but we just let people make assumptions.
Yes. Yeah. to the night wing party.
So we might have been, what do you call catfishing? It's like you can see it, you're just misrepresenting your skill sets, maybe. What's that called?
Oh, man, what do you think?
That's called minnow fishing.
Minnow fishing, I don't know.
Like, she does look like that, but she cannot cook like that.
No, I can't. Now I can't. Now I can't. Now I'm an adult. Something has
And we have
changed.
cooked together a lot, and you like made it true.
I did.
A lot of us do in our 20s, though. Did anyone else do that? Where you kind of like might have
Bake it till you make it a little bit.
for sure. I mean, I know we all did that orgasm at some point, but I think you just kind of like tell the version that you wish was true, and then if you actually have like backbone and character, you figure out how to make it true.
And it becomes true at some
Yes.
point.
Yes.
Because again, you bake it till you make it.
Yeah.
You become it.
That's
So back to the story. After minnow fishing.
Yeah.
It was a great night.
yeah, for
At
what it
the-
was.
Dinner was great.
Dinner was delicious.
Dinner was delicious. And as everyone was leaving, he wasn't leaving.
right. And we did the like eye contact thing. Was it like, do I need to kick him out? She's like, nope, he's staying. Dessert.
And the third was to more tequila.
Yeah, then me and Mike left, and this is when you lived in that old house with the spiders.
Yeah, they're getting
Definitely
the real version. So, side note, I lived in a house that was infested with brown recluse spiders, which is a thing in Nashville. So I don't want people to think I'm some dirty person that lives in a spider
Right,
house.
no, this was a very common occurrence in Nashville, and
It's a very common
Yeah.
occurrence. And so I was living in a house that was infested with spiders, and we were talking about it, I guess, at dinner about how there were spiders. And if you know anything about brown recluse spiders, they don't really come out there. They're kind of afraid of humans,
they're
but
called recluse spiders.
I really thought about that, but yes, and so they don't really come out. They're not infesting my home. So anyways, we had a little bit too much tequila and a little bit too much dessert. And one thing led to another, and we were consensual adults at that time, even though I had a lot of anxious attachment. And
And common sense mistakes were made.
common sense mistakes were made, and the icing on the cake was
They're lying in bed sometime afterward. And it's what, 2 a.m? 2 a.m. And our visitor, temporary visitor, in your bed and in our life, because he's no longer near either of those things, leans over and is like, stop thinking about the spiders, and I think I'm gonna go. And she's like, oh, okay. Cool. So he gets up to leave, rummages around. She's laying in here like, how have I done this to myself again? And as she's laying there and the shame spiral and self-hatred starting to boil ad nauseum, he pops his head in the door and is like, is it cool if I take the salmon?
He took
leftovers.
the leftovers.
From our taco.
He took the leftovers.
Yeah, he took the leftover salmon. He took it home with him, which was right next door to me, the person who cooked it.
And I remember calling her the next morning and saying, I think I was on speaker, because I remember Mike listening in, and I was like, he took the salmon.
And Mike was like, is this a euphemism? And she's like, I mean, that also happened, but he took the leftover salmon, the miso glazed salmon. I don't even get a consolation lunch of delicious leftovers.
Nothing.
Because this person
Took the salmon.
had the complete audacity of his white maleness
To take the
to
salmon.
not stick around to face off the spiders, but to take the last of the salmon.
So that's a sneak peek of what my life used to look like.
So those are the kind of men that she used to accept. And if you listening have accepted less than you deserve, there is hope.
There is a
Because I don't think anyone's asked us for the leftovers in a really long time.
Well, it's been 10 years. That moment really changed me. But I think now to get to the serious part, because we were talking about this before we came
Oh
on,
my
like,
God.
holy shit, I like that so much. Yeah. And the way, and it's no, I mean, if you're listening to that and you're laughing at home, like it's no surprise that I made my way into this field.
Right.
Because I always say, like, the dating and the relationship world, I did not choose it. It
Right.
literally chose me.
Yeah.
Because of all of the mess that I've had to clean up over the past 10 years. I was cursed, but in the most beautiful way, because I've had to grow so much. All of my healings from
I was
dating.
gonna make a first joke, but I didn't know.
We can't. Don't make the curse joke. We're not doing that.
We're not doing that today.
We're not doing it. I
Talk
did
about
see,
how Lauren is cursed.
yes, yes. I did see a tear over here that told me I was
Right after she told me my life was gonna be awesome and everything was great.
awful.
It was my birthday, so that, you know.
It was your birthday. But I was in a shame spiral of, oh my gosh, I'm in my 30s and I'm not married and I don't have kids.
She's like, yeah, it's because you're cursed. And I was like, well, that checks out. Let's get back to that another time. Everything's fine, by the way.
We'll talk about that on the
Yeah.
next podcast.
Everything's okay.
We're good now. We broke the spell. We're no
Yeah,
longer
we're okay.
cursed and we're thriving. So now we're going to talk about, because it's interesting how much it has come full circle. And you and I were speaking about, because people always ask me, like, what happened in your last relationship? Because it looked like, and even the way that it was presented, it checkmarked all the boxes.
Ooh, the checkbox system is a flawed system.
It is a flawed system.
It's-
And there has been so much undoing since, well, over the past, should it have been
6 months, 7 months,
6 months? Yeah,
since everything.
everything went down, that it's flipped a lot of my views and a lot. I mean, I've been going through healing, like I said at the beginning, lightning speed
You're in a vortex.
In a
You've been
vortex.
in a healing pressure cooker for a
for a
little
while. And I think that this is the first time that I've been dating, probably in my life, where I'm not dating based on the checklist. And it's been new.
It is new and it's uncomfy. It's uncomfy to do. I'm the recipient of the texts that are like, okay, this is weird because strangely I'm having fun, but here's all the boxes that he doesn't check.
Yeah.
And Mike and I take those text messages and we read them amongst ourselves while we're out. We're like, isn't this fun? Because we don't check any of each other's boxes either. And I thought that was such an interesting, we were laughing about it, but it's true. Like if I were to hold my husband of, we've been together 11 years, but almost 10 years, married, up against the checklist of what I thought I wanted, he would not check very many of those. I mean, if any, he might check 3 out of 10 or 2 out of 10. And I can say that because he would say the same thing.
Yeah.
Like the things that we thought we really valued in a partner in our 20s, those didn't end up being the things that really mattered the most when it came down to it. It's
Right.
like we met each other and our relationship, this is something we talk about in our maintenance couples therapy sessions often. Like our relationship isn't based on our commonalities. Like that's not what brought us together. We were very, I mean, they say opposites attract, and that is somewhat true and very true in our case. But it's like at the very core of everything, there is this curiosity and this mutual respect and this intrigue. And there's of course polarity from the fact that we don't have a ton in common, and that keeps things pretty zesty, both in intellectual conversation and in the bedroom. But it's just, if we'd been doing the checklist thing, I would have missed out on an incredible guy who is like the best dad and the best friend, and just the person who has been able to hold so much space for me to be all of the iterations of myself. And we met when I was 23. Like I'm so myself. I've always been myself, but I'm so different, you know, at 34 than I was at 24. And he's been there for that whole decade.
Yeah. Well, and I think because, and I know people are going to listen to this, and they're going to say, yeah, Lauren, but you preach all the time that you get to have it all. And I think that what I'm learning is that that statement is still true. It's just that what all looks like is different.
Yeah.
And the checklist that I was living off of for so long was so surface level and so, I don't know the word, maybe you find the word.
Well, I think the thing that I said to you maybe a month ago was, I think the journey that truly that you have been on, and I think that we all go on at some point or another, especially in this day and age, is, do I want a life that looks good, or do I want a life that feels good? And that's where, I think that's where sometimes the rub is for people, where when the life that feels good doesn't look like what you thought, and it doesn't add up to all the things that maybe you've even been told that you're supposed to want, or, you've been subtly inundated through culture, society, even subcultures. Personal growth is a subculture, y'all. All of the, making 7 figures and living in places with white walls with nothing on them is like, it's an aesthetic, it's a subculture.
Yeah.
And how many women do I talk to? Oh, I just 7 figures and live in a house that looks like this Pinterest board that, 1 billion people have. And it becomes very cookie cutter.
Right.
And so then when you start to get back to who you were before the world told you who you were supposed to be, when you start reconnecting with that version of you who was 8 or 9 and who really loved dance or horses or whatever, and you start kind of pulling in this color and this texture that we all kind of buffed out and smoothed out to make ourselves more palatable, things start to shift, and we start to realize that the things that we've wanted the most are potentially things that we have been afraid to want
For so long. Well, and there's been such a deconstruction of who I am over the past couple of months, and it has come in like a freight train. I feel like I've called you many of nights just being like, this doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
These things that I wanted in the past, they don't feel, I've never been in a situation where so many of my quote unquote boxes were checked and I was so unfulfilled and I was so unhappy and I was so I felt a little hollow inside. Like there wasn't really anything there to fill that void. And I think because I see this happen with so many of my clients, you get this thing, the universe ultimately will provide you with exactly what you ask.
Yep.
And then what ends up happening is that people end up getting it and they realize there's a tiny little voice inside of them. If it's not coming from a place of true authenticity, there's a voice inside of them that says, wait a second, this doesn't actually feel like I thought it would feel.
Yeah.
And there's so many women that say, yeah, but it's exactly what I wanted. Like I had it on paper and this person is here, it's on paper, it doesn't feel the way that I wanted it to feel. And I think that was a really hard moment for me to acknowledge, wait a second, this is everything on paper that I want, and it doesn't feel at all the way that it should. And that exiting that relationship and starting to go back out into the dating world from the space of, okay, well, if I received everything on paper that I thought I wanted and it didn't feel like I thought it would feel, now what?
Yeah. Now, what do I even want?
Now what do I want?
Yeah.
And that's the real work. Like that's the real work that I have been. And that really opened my eyes to that question, like, how do I want to feel when I'm with somebody?
And I think something I've noticed, one of the biggest differences I've noticed in your dating recently versus before is that when you would date someone, sometimes the recap would be one of 2 things. It would either be, we're so excited, he is all of these things, like all of the surface level things, all of this stuff looks good, right? Like this is all here. And then it's like, oh, okay, but like, what about these things? And it's like, or it was, here's all the things that I don't like about him. Here's all the stuff I don't like. Here's all the stuff I don't want. Here's all, and that's, I think even up to your last relationship, it was like, it wasn't about all the parts that were right. It was about all the parts that were wrong constantly. I'd be like, okay, well, these things are great, but there's like this thing or this thing or this thing. And I feel like you've really shifted the intention or even just the energy in how you're dating now. And when we talk, it's more like, is he 10 out of 10? No, but out of all the things I really value, he's really good at this one. Like this person was a really, really good listener. And I really value that. And I realized in going on several dates with him, how much it means to me to have a partner who's a really, really good listener. This person is incredibly thoughtful, and going out with him for a few weeks has like really made an impression on me about how nurtured and cared for I feel when someone shows that much thought or attention to detail. And like maybe these aren't people who you're going to end up with long term, but you're learning from them what it is you really do want, versus like them being dismissed immediately because they're not everything all at once, and I think you're enjoying connecting with people on a human level more, because you can feel their value and what they have to offer, even if it's not the person for you.
Right. Well, and I think that points back to the work that we do.
Yeah.
And that we help and lead women through, because I'll be honest, if there was a really long time where when you don't have the language to speak what you're feeling and how it's showing up in your body, you're kind of dating with blinders on. You're kind of out there just like, oh, does this person check all these boxes? Like, who even cares about how they feel? Because I didn't know how I felt.
Like, just keep talking back and forth between the people who activate you the most.
Yeah, right. Because it feels like that's what I should want, or they were touching on some sort of activation that felt like
It was
passion.
familiar, right?
Yeah, it felt like passion. It felt like it was excitement. But really, it was a big fat survival response that I was labeling as an attachment.
Well,
right?
it's none of
And I
our
was
faults
excited.
that we do that. We've had that marketed to us directly through movies, cinema, like literally everything is like, ooh, the fireworks, like everything's exciting, everything's explosive, everything. And it's like, you get 5 years into doing somatic nervous system work, and you're like, oh, the more explosive, the more threat we are sensing, the more danger we are perceiving, and we're going into our adaptive coping mechanisms, and that's the version of us that's showing up, not our authentic self.
Right. And ultimately that's the work that I lead women through, is how do you come home to yourself so that you can feel safety within your own body, and then you can recognize that in a man when you start to date. And that, I think, has been the biggest shift internally for me, to be able to recognize that safety in a man.
Yeah.
Because I had never, first off, I didn't have the internal words because I didn't know what it felt like. I was constantly in a state of survival all the time. And then B, to even recognize that in someone else was like off the table, because I didn't have that type of language. And so to now be able to date men who genuinely, I think I called you a few weeks ago and I was like, he asked me, what do you need? Like, what do I need? What do you need from me? Is there anything that you need from me right now? And I'm like,
she's like, what do I need from him right now?
I'm like, oh, I mean, like,
you can answer that.
that's
But
such
you have to sit with it.
yeah, that's such a big question that, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's really beautiful to hear that, because now I can check in with my body. What do I need? And I can vocalize that. And then to be able to vocalize it and to have it met with, okay, I can meet that need. My whole nervous system was like, oh, this is safe. And that is something that I've just, not that I've never experienced it, but that's a different way of dating. And again, I've seen it with my clients over and over again, who get to that space of safety within themselves. And they're like, oh my gosh, this man feels so safe. It feels like it's a different feeling. It's different than,
well, and
crazy roller coaster.
the safe guys get a bad rap. Like, you see it again in like movies and rom-coms and whatever. It's like, it's always the, secretly hot best friend who's like super nice. It's like the nice guys finish last. Like, nobody wants the nerdy nice guy because he's safe and he's not exciting. He doesn't ride a motorcycle or make our nervous systems jump up and down. Right. And so we kind of overlook the nice guys. And honestly, what's hilarious is that I got fucking tricked, because they talk about, women get accused of doing this all the time, broad generalizations, so don't at me. I thought, like, when I met my husband, the company that he was keeping at the time, I'll just say it, they were all a bunch of douchebags, so I just assumed he was also a douchebag. And he was a really lovely, decent guy masquerading as a douchebag.
Yeah.
And so I only gave him the time of day because he was acting like a douchebag. And then I was like, wait, why are you secretly like so
Really
kind?
great
Like,
guy.
really?
We all love
I know.
Mike so much. He also is a great plant daddy.
He's a good, yeah, the best man daddy.
I think we need to create an apparel line that says safe as sex. Okay, I also should never.
not a marketing
I'm not a
person.
marketing genius, okay?
It's not the copy.
Yeah, maybe not the copy.
Yeah. But like a play on safe sex,
Yeah.
like, you know, that could be, also
Yeah.
I've thrown peace signs like twice, and it's because I haven't been guys, sorry, like.
We're getting
I haven't
out
worked
into
the
the
camera since peace signs were cool. My third one. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, well, this is always a great conversation. You know, we always have great conversation. I'll say this too, just off the cuff. I've been having the best sex of my life.
And we are here for that. We have been
Because safe is
waving.
sexy. Safe is sexy.
And it's so interesting because for such a long time, you know, the report would be like, oh my God, like, I don't think I'm into him. I don't
He's
feel
so
anything. I don't
hot.
feel anything. And now you're like, I don't know if I'm attracted to this guy, but like I've orgasmed 5 times. I'm like, well, it sounds like you are attracted to this guy. It just doesn't look the way you thought it was going to look or have always thought it was going to look.
Yeah.
But I mean, something we talk about ad nauseum in our practices are, you know, an indicator that you're in a pattern is that everything is the same all the time, as it looks the same. And so signs that you're breaking the pattern, that you're climbing out of the groove, are when you start to notice what's different.
Yeah.
And there's so many things about how you're dating and how you're showing up now and the types of men you're attracting and all these things now that are different.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's just a testament to the fact that you're like climbing out of the trauma ditch.
Yeah.
Go you.
It's work. I mean, it really is dedicating yourself to, I really do feel like we all go through, at some point in our life, if we choose the path, we go through this work in one way or another. Whether it's through parenting, or it's through the dating world, or it's through marriage, like at some point, you have to go through this journey of coming home to yourself. And it's funny because, and I'm sure that you've had experiences like this too, but we're in this work. We lead people through it every single day. We do it every single day. And yet we still are this we're just an evolving human that's always going through different stages of it.
Well, and yeah, that's called being human.
It's life.
It's called being human. And if you ever meet a practitioner or a therapist or a helper, coach, whoever, who is like, yeah, I've arrived, then take your
Run.
time, run. Do not. Like, we want people who are embodying evolution and growth and putting into practice. We want people walking the walk.
Mm-hmm.
And I've never positioned myself as an expert because I don't believe anymore. I used to, but I don't really believe in experts. Like the people who know the most are lifelong students.
Mm-hmm.
They continue to wear the student hat and be in the student role. And I am willing to learn from every client I have. I become a better practitioner every single session that I do. And I do my own sessions. Like, I have always seen my role as reaching back, and like, depending on where someone is starting their journey, that's just how far back they are. We're on the same road. I'm just maybe a little bit further ahead. And so I'm going to reach a hand back and pull them up alongside me.
Yeah.
And I feel like there was something else I was going to say. It popped out of my brain whenever I went on that little soapbox, but
I know, but it's so true because we've talked about this a million times before, but there's so many people in the personal development space who preach that they have it all figured out. And the truth is, nobody has it figured out. Nobody. I don't care who it is. And if they're preaching that, they don't know what's happening. If they're not actively involved in their own process, and you probably should learn.
And the best teachers aren't the ones who know all of the answers or pretend to know all of the answers. They're the ones who ask the most questions of themselves and then also of the people learning from them. Always. And I said to my sister the other day, I was having one of my, weekly existential, maybe it's a monthly existential situation. Always pre-ovulation. I'm like, am I ever going to make it to where I'm going? Does anyone else do that? I I was saying, I'm like, I know at this point in my life, I know, so I just have to stop getting in my own way. There's the part of me I can recognize that is like, I just want to get, I think you've been here on your journey. I want to get to this place, to this destination. Like, am I going to make this much money? Am I going to write and publish this book? Am I going to get this fellowship? Am I going to, I want to just get there so that I can be a peaceful, present woman. And the thing that we all find out eventually is that we have to become that peaceful, present person to get there.
Amen. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that goes with everything. Every single thing. Like, it's funny. I don't know how much of this I should share on the podcast, but we were talking about something that you and I did on my birthday, which it just reminded me that we never finished your list of things that you have to complete. That's your birthday. Anyways, side note, we'll do that tonight.
We have lists.
We have lists. Good one. We'll do wine and list later. For my birthday this year, we wrote down all of these things that I really wanted to call in for myself. And after we wrote that list, I took some time to get really clear on, but what would need to change in my life in order for those things to come in? And it was like, there was a part of me that came to you and I was like, oh, these things feel like they're just too far off. Like, they're never going to happen. I'm never going to get married. I'm never going to have kids. I'm 36 years old. I'm not where I want to be as far as success is concerned. It was like all of these things that I was comparing myself to. And part of the past couple of months, both of us have been keeping each other accountable on, but how can we just find peace with where we are now? Yeah. And the list is
because
happening.
The thing nobody wants to say and nobody wants to hear is like, what if you don't find a husband in this lifetime? What if you don't find that person? What if that isn't your calling? Like, I don't believe that, but what if you don't? What if you don't have a baby the way that you think you will? What if you don't have a family the way that you think you will? Are you just gonna spend every day waiting for something that may not come? Like, how are you going to build a life that you aren't waiting for someone or something to come and save you from?
Yeah.
And I ask myself that question all the time. And like, that's how I ended up in a 100-year-old farmhouse in the, middle of the Midwest. Like, that was never part of my dream.
Right.
And it is now a part of my dream. Is it the end of the dream? No, but it is a part of my dream. And that's because I sit in this house in certain rooms with the sun coming in, and I can't imagine being any happier or more content than I am right now.
Yeah.
And that's something I never knew was possible 10 years ago.
Yeah. Because when you surrender to that and you find, and that was a hard question. I remember you asking me that and I was so pissed at you. I was like, I don't want to have to think about it. Like, I don't want to. But then it sunk in and I recognized, but if it is true, am I going to just spend my days in misery? And I called you a month ago and I was like, it was probably 2 weeks ago. And I said, I had something unfortunate happen. And it was a massive wake-up call for me because I realized, like, it is a pattern to be miserable.
Yeah.
Like, to always be searching for something else and to never be present in the moment.
Yeah.
And to be happy with where I was in said moment. And it was like, once I was able to surrender to peace and you know what? I am really healthy. I have a great life. I have beautiful friends. I
have resources. Like, you could go most places and do most things
that most people can't.
And it's like, we're squandering that. Yeah.
And when I recognized that, and the crazy thing is that once you realize it and you surrender to that, the things you want start coming in at lightning fast speed. But it's getting to the space and getting out of your own way to surrender it. That's the hard.
And I think asking those questions of ourselves, like, I do think there's been a disservice has been done in the, like, it's called toxic positivity. Oh no, like, we don't even allow ourselves to go there. We don't even allow ourselves to think that. We're not going to call that in. We're not going to manifest that. We're not going to, and I'm like, bullshit. Because what happens is you end up walking on eggshells, trying to like follow this little like cosmic hopscotch path that's going to magically deliver everything you want. And what ends up happening is you feel like you're holding your breath. You feel like everything is really fragile. And if you don't do everything just right and believe just right and manifest just right and like stay totally positive, then you're not going to get what you want.
Yeah.
And that's just not true. And it takes away something like really sturdy. So like to me, I would rather be like, what happens if you don't get that? And you have to be able to sit and be like, well, I would still be here and I would figure out what
I would live with you in mind. Yeah, live with you in mind.
Yeah. And let's figure out what else we want. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's figure out what is next then. And it's not giving up on your dream to acknowledge that we are going to keep moving and keep growing and keep trying and keep being curious and keep asking questions and keep evolving, even if we don't get that thing.
And I hope that there's a lot of people that listen to this and take a moment to get curious, because that was a big question for me.
Yeah.
Over the past couple of months. Well, I'm supposed to be keeping these at 20 minutes.
Oh, you didn't tell me
Okay.
that. I don't think you told me that.
So, and if we ever have 5 minutes, they're just gonna have to listen to our
Right.
hour-long conversations, but that's
I-
basically our.
I don't know. I know. I was waiting for James. James is like here in the house. I was waiting for her to come through and end it at like
We have the best daughter ever.
We do.
Listen and see her over there.
I know.
Little foot pointing in the air.
I know. We were out when we were first getting back out there after the breakup, after a considerable amount of time passed. Whatever. We started going out, and Mike went out with us. I went out to wing you, and Mike came out to emotionally support us and drive us. And he had a friend meet him to keep him company so that I could go about and do my wing woman job. And he's like, I don't know how many guys Lala's gonna pick up, because they're all gonna think that you're her high-powered lesbian lover, and they're gonna think you guys are wives.
They're not wrong.
Yeah, they're gonna think you're wives, and she might not do very well. And I was like, God, we do look so good together. That I know. We go out and I'm like, I'm sure people do
Probably
think
think
that. I don't manage.
You were a bad woman that night.
I still got it.
That was my first date out of the gate, you guys know. And it was because of you.
And it was with a former NFL football player
It was.
who I just happened to pick up out of nowhere.
I know. Fantastic. It was a great night. Well, thank you for listening to this episode of the Align Love podcast.
I hope you got something out of it.
Yes. And we will just stay tuned, because I'm going to convince Christin over the next 2 weeks that we're gonna bring back a podcast. So yeah. All right, I love you guys so much.
Right here.
We'll be right here. See you next time. Bye. That wraps up today's episode of the Aligned Love podcast. One thing that would really help me and the other new potential listeners is for you to rate this show and leave a comment wherever you tune in and listen. Also, make sure to link up with me on Instagram at Lauren Zoller, and please share this podcast with anyone who you think may enjoy it. Until next episode, remember, every transformation begins with one moment of awareness, and I hope today has been yours. I'll see you next time.